This is LING 270, Language, Technology, and Society, Module 4, Printing. In this lesson, we'll conclude our module on printing. So printing, as we've talked about, is, I am arguing, is one of the most significant inventions of mankind. And the reason for this is that it was one of the first major inventions of mass communication. So printing made it much easier to communicate with a much wider amount of people. And since our society depends on the way that we communicate with each other, this had profound societal impacts, as I went to in detail. Now, we usually consider the main invention of printing to be Gutenberg's printing press, but we also noted that printing is in fact an ancient technology. Things that we might consider printers have fairly early predecessors. So, for example, there were things like stamps and cylinder seals, which could easily produce multiple copies of an image, which we found in multiple parts of the world and as early as 5,000 years ago. And also, we saw that the technique of woodblock printing existed in many cultures, especially in China, where it was even used to reproduce documents. Now, one thing to note is that wood is not a very durable material for printing. Over time, if it's used repeatedly, it kind of wears down a little bit. And we also noted that in China, movable type had been invented around the year 1000 AD. And this is pretty significant because movable type is often an invention associated with Gutenberg. But it's important to remember that Gutenberg was actually, in fact, not the first to use this kind of typing, and may have even been inspired from that. We don't know enough about that since Gutenberg's process was so secretive. So it's important to emphasize that Gutenberg was not the first individual to use movable type. It had predecessor in China. So Gutenberg actually developed his printing press from the years 1436 to 1450. And as I said, this was a fairly secretive process, possibly to keep his trade secrets to himself, realizing how lucrative this business might be. And although Gutenberg didn't invent the technology of printing, and he wasn't the first to use movable type, he was innovative in the way that he developed his typecasting process. So as we talked about, this is the process of quickly reproducing identical metal types, that is the stamps for each letter in an alphabet. And another major advancement of his was the usage of oil-based ink. And by using oil-based ink, it made it possible to use paper as a printing medium. And so this made it, and paper is much cheaper than the previously popular vellum made from animal skins. So that made printing much cheaper and much easier to do on a larger scale. We talked about Gutenberg's first printing projects, which included the 42-line Bible, a very well-renowned copy of the Bible, and also the printing of indulgences. And we saw how critical of a role these indulgences played in the Protestant Reformation. So now, shortly after Gutenberg had developed his printing press, we saw that it spread very rapidly throughout Europe. And that kind of suggests that there was a strong demand for printed material. This was the Renaissance, after all. Now, once printing had become widespread and people began to communicate with each other in different ways, we see very profound societal changes. So printing contributed to many different things. Printing wasn't the sole cause, but it was probably a very major factor in all of these things. We saw that printing was very significant in the Protestant Reformation and religious movements in Europe. We saw a renewal in in philosophy and politics, which we call the Enlightenment. We saw how printing could be used to develop ideas of national language and people's national identities. We saw how printing could develop ideas of scientific theories and spread ideas of empirical knowledge that contributed to the scientific revolution. We saw that printing could make many economic advancements, especially in business. And we saw that there were many legal impacts of printing as well, such as the censorship by institutions like the church and the courts, and also the development of copyright laws, the idea of intellectual property and demands for freedom of the press. So in the modern day, we saw that the printing press after the Gutenberg didn't change for hundreds of years. But by the time the Industrial Revolution came along, we saw many inventions that were used that greatly increased the speed and the quality of printing, such as the rotary press and the steam-powered press. And we see that there are many new techniques of printing which are used in the modern day, such as offset printers, inkjet printers, and laser printers, the last two of which are printer technologies which are affordable by the average individual. So this shows how far printing has progressed as a technology. Now, of course, printing is not used as widely as it was in the recent past. A lot of the printed text has been replaced with digital text. So printing is trending towards becoming an obsolete technology. However, the digital revolution is also significantly affecting the way that we communicate with each other, in the same way that the printing press affected communication and, as a result, society. And this has to do with the dramatic increase in the speed that we're able to communicate with each other. We can communicate across the globe in a matter of seconds. So you can imagine just how many effects this can have. As a result, there are new patterns of organization, both political and social. So a lot of these we see in our current events in the modern day, and we will likely see in the near future. So that's something I would like you to reflect about. Think about the ways that the printing press had impacted society and how that might be similar to how the digital revolution is impacting society today.